All yours.
Okay, so I'm Nikki Thomas and I live near Norwich. I ring at St Peter Mancroft in Norwich, and I also run a 6-bell tower, South Walsham. Most of my ringing really is done at South Walsham. I've been in charge of the ringing there for quite a while, and I also I teach people to ring. The other thing that I do that you may or may not know about is I'm the manager at the Mancroft Ringing Discovery Centre. So I'm a paid bell ringer. So I have a job for 3 days a week teaching people to ring, and I'm furloughed at the moment. So it just seems a bit strange, really, not teaching people and just doing things on Ringing Room. And I've used Ringing Room quite a lot. I've used it to develop handbell ringing with some new people. I'm progressing my own handbell ringing on there, and I also have my South Walsham practice on Ringing Room. It seems a bit strange, really, that Roger asked me to do a talk on calling and working up towards calling a quarter of bob doubles, because really I would say I'm probably one of the worst people to do that. I've had South Walsham practice for quite a long time, and really I never called anything. I would say go and stop, and I jokingly called it a plain course tower because I just hadn't got enough nerve to call anything. And it wasn't until 2018 that I called my first quarter of plain bob doubles, and I started ringing when I was 9. I was introduced to ringing by my dad, and I've been ringing surprise ringing since the early 1980s. So I just had never ever called anything, and even though I'd been in charge of the tower, I just relied on experienced conductors, and they never really shared what they did. And I think that was my downfall. I got to the stage where I was just too embarrassed to ask how to call anything. So 2018, I decided I would call a quarter peal, and I called plain bob doubles. And the next quarter peal I called was in September 2019, when I called Grandsire doubles. Now, I was made to do this. It was somebody who I do a lot of ringing teaching with, Catherine, who she's very good at getting people to progress. And she knew I could do it, but I didn't know I could call anything, really. And we taught Toby Price, who is a young ringer, and he was ringing very, very nicely. And we wanted him to ring a quarter peal of Grandsire doubles. He was going back to college, and still on the Sunday before the quarter peal, I hadn't even understood how to call Grandsire. I hadn't looked at how to call Grandsire, and I hadn't even attempted it. So I really I had the pressure on me, and I had to get on with it. And I would not recommend that as a way forwards. So I think from that, I then decided that nobody in my tower was going to get into that situation that I'd been in, that they were too embarrassed to ask how to call things. So I made it very open that everybody would become involved in calling. So so what I've done with this talk is I've broken it down into steps, which is very similar to how I did the course that's on the Association of Ringing Teachers site. So the first step really is to get used to talking while ringing. I think you've all grasped that I do talk quite a lot, but it is hard to ring and to talk. So you do need quite a lot of practice in this. And I'd say the first step is to start off by calling simple call changes. And again, work out what those call changes are before you're going to call them. Don't get hold of your rope and then think, right, I'm going to call some call changes. It just makes it 10 times harder looking around the ropes and working out what to say. So have a method, write out what your call changes are going to be, just a few of them, take it, say, to Queens and back again, and get used to speaking and ringing and calling in the right place. Once you've done that, or an alternative, if you're not happy with doing the call changes, is to call plain courses, to get used to saying, go plain bob doubles, and that's all. And that's really all I did for years and years and years. I was able to start ringing, and I was able to find the end, but I literally did it for for about 20, 30 years. So not very progressive, but it did stand me in good stead that I knew when the right time to say go and also when things come round. If you get your learner ringers to start doing that right from the beginning, it is amazing how exciting it is, and it is really lovely to see your newer ringers progress, and they really can at a very early stage call changes, call plain courses, and just getting used to speaking while ringing. So starting off by calling this plain course, you do need to say plain bob doubles as the treble pulls off at hand stroke. You need to say that's all as the treble is pulling their hand stroke at lead and just before they lead. And you need to speak slowly and speak into the centre of the circle and not in a muffled way into your arm. And it's very easy to speak too quickly when you're calling. So just getting the timing right and that you're comfortable is very, very important. Project your voice into the centre of the circle and just be aware and look at what the treble's doing all the time. That really is your key. And another technique really is to start off by ringing the treble, because that way you don't have to think what's the treble doing. As you move further round, the calls you need to call sooner than you expect as you move round to bells 2, 3, 4 and 5. It does take practice. So just start off with calling plain courses on each bell. And the other thing is you're in charge of that ringing. So you need to think what you're hearing. You need to get the rounds to settle. And if you hear that somebody isn't leading correctly, if somebody's bell isn't in the right place, do say, because they may be just concentrating on catching their Sally. Try and give them a little bit of encouragement and get those rounds right before you say anything. Another key to ringing is while you are ringing a method that you're really comfortable with, keep an eye on that treble and watch whether it's going up or going down. So is the treble taking its place, is going up to the back, or is it coming down to the front? Are you following it? Are you crossing paths with it so you're going in the other direction? And also learning to listen to what the treble's doing. I probably do that more than looking at what the treble's doing. I'll be listening to where it is in the change. But I think it's different things to different people. And if you can hear what's happening, it is half the battle. So once you're happy with starting ringing off and saying that's all, your next step is to move on to calling your first touch. And so here we're going to have a look at ringing 120 of bob doubles. So I'm just going to go back onto my slides now and share this. Now the slides are from the course that I did, which Roger is going to send round. I can't do two things at once. I'm just proving how difficult it is. Okay, so this is from the course, and there are quite a few useful slides as well as the course. You can flick through the slides and see them all in a collection at the end of the course. So when you're calling a touch of plain bob doubles, you'll be looking at calling 120 changes. The plain course of bob doubles is 40 changes long, and by calling one bell unaffected, we can extend it to 120 changes. In this touch, you call a bob every time one bell makes long fifths, and by calling 3 bobs to the touch, it will come round after 120 changes. It doesn't matter which bell you choose to ring, and by calling yourself unaffected, it will come round. The sequence of calls is all that will differ. So if you call it from the 2, the calls will be plain, bob, plain, plain 3 times. And from the 5th, it would be plain, 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 bob 3 times. The calls in plain bob doubles are made as the treble is in seconds place at backstroke, about to lead, and the lead end is as the treble leads. It's important to be able to identify the lead end. As I said before, look at that treble all the time, and to know with absolute certainty where the lead end is. To make a call in long fifths, you call the bob in your first blows in fifths place, but you need to watch the treble and make the call as the treble rings at backstroke. The treble, remember, is earlier in the change, so aim to call it a little earlier rather than a little late, and you will have another 2 calls to make before the touch comes round. You need to clearly say that's all at the end, and you also need to have practice at this, but you've done that by bringing your plain courses. Now let me just have a look at my other slides. Stop sharing. It's hard to do, it really is hard to do 2 things at once.
You should be able to move around in PowerPoint without going out, stopping sharing, Nikki.
I know, but then you'll just see me blundering around. Right. I think this is another useful slide, which just shows you the difference. Right. This slide I also quite like, because it just shows you whether you're calling it hand stroke or backstroke, when you're running in, when you're running out, when you're making fourths, and when you're doing the 4 blows behind at the back as well. It just gives you the calling positions, and I just think that's a very useful slide. So I'm just going to leave that. I made a note just to leave that one on there. So you've got 4 different 120s. And having got to grips with calling yourself unaffected, which is the one where you're doing the 4 blows behind, it's now time to look at the other 3, calling in, out, and make the bob. Getting used to the calls in these positions does take practice, and I'll come on to how I practice in a while. So I do practice before I go to the tower. So as I say, I'll come back to that. You always call the bobs in the order in, out, and make it, which was actually the previous slide that I showed. And I remember that as Isle of Man. And yeah, I think it just coming up with something that makes you remember in, out, make it, so that you can just quickly think that as you're ringing. It makes such a difference. So you can call the bobs in the order in, out, make it. And you have to get used to know the two different 120s. The other 2 are out, make, and in, and then make, in, and out. If you can see who is unaffected by the call, which is the bell that's making long fifths, it also gives you another visual clue when to call the bob. And again, this takes practice, so don't worry if you can't see it to start with. If you remember in, out, and make it, that gives you 120. The final thing you have to get used to is calling a 60. And you do this by calling a bob at alternate leads. So you do a bob, a plane, a bob, a plane, a bob, and a plane. I think it's a really good idea to mention that art has got its learning portal on this course, and everything that I've been prepared has come from that. I wrote the course earlier in the year, and we did it without being able to use any videos of ringing in the tower. So it was a question of going through and looking on Able and working out how we were going to start calling and practicing. So I'm rambling now. Just bear with me a second. Right, okay. So there's really useful slides throughout this course. As Roger says, I can just flick through them and show you. That's the sequence of calls. The in, out, and make it. Also, the other bells are doing at the same time. You've got that slide. And I'll go back. This is my Isle of Man one. that's a little bit more. So if you're calling off the fourth, in, out and make it, out, make and in and out, or unaffected where you've got the blank box. When Roger asked, so lots of practice in the tower of ringing the different 120s, and do become familiar on calling the 120 from different bells. And also, when you're going to ring your first quarter peal, just pick which bell you're going to ring it from and just really, really practice so that those 120s, you don't have to think about it. I think that's terribly important. So Roger asked me if I could do some tips on calling your first quarter peal. So having learned how to call these 4 different extents and also the 60, you are just about there. You just have to put everything together. But there are a few things that will help you and make things a little bit less stressful. So choose your band and tower wisely. You can always ask an expert conductor to come in and ring in the quarter as well. They can be your trip advisor. I rather like that term rather than a conductor. So all you need to concentrate on is ringing your bell and not making a mistake. Hopefully you can then rely on everybody else to ring their bell and not making a mistake. But if you've got an experienced ringer who can come in and just pick people right if there's a trip, it does take a lot of pressure off you. You can also ask that person to give you feedback on whether you get the calls in the right place. And I think that's important when you're practicing your 120s as well, to ask people, and even your learner ringers, were the calls in the right place? Had you got enough time to think and react to the calls, or were they too early and caused you to be a little bit confused? So feedback is really important. So your role is to choose your correct band, to decide when the ringing's settled down enough and say go, and just to be comfortable putting the calls in the right place. You do need to enjoy the quarter peal. And another idea that you could have is to ask somebody else to come along and ring the quarter peal with you and to call it with you. So you could do half each. Now, when I did mine, I was very worried about being able to count the number of extents that we were going to ring. So I came up with a little bit of a different system, possibly, to counting. So I had a backup plan. I did it so that when I went round the circle, I called each person unaffected, but I kept thinking about that person, so I didn't forget who the bell was that was unaffected. So I'd be doing it for the 2 and calling the 2 unaffected at the back. I'd then be, the 3 would be the person who was unaffected at the back, then the 4. And I thought of it more as a person than numbers. And that was just something that helped me. If you're very, very numbers orientated, then keep counting, but just dedicating each 120 to a person, I found worked really well for me. Also really important to select a bell that you're comfortable ringing. And remember, it's a public performance. It needs to be of a good standard. And as conductor, it is your responsibility. The standard of ringing is just so important. Yes, there will be mistakes, but try and eliminate them by getting people on bells that they feel comfortable, and also making sure that you're comfortable with your bell. And don't be afraid to ask for support from people, from stronger ringers. One thing that I've learned about bell ringers is they're really, really willing and want to help people. And it doesn't matter how many peals or quarter peals they've rung, there are people out there who are just so keen to help and offer advice. And yes, my final point on the quarter peal is just try and stay right yourself. I know it's easier said than done, but you'll get so much more satisfaction if you practiced and you can manage to keep yourself right. Look on Able as well and see when the quarter peal is going to come round. I actually speak from experience that this yesterday I called a quarter. It's a handbell quarter. and I knew the composition. And I suddenly realised when I started ringing, I hadn't noted when it comes round. And when you're ringing, so handbell ringing and putting the calls in, and you've suddenly got to work out when the quarter's going to come round, it gets a bit stressful. But I managed it. And again, I need to practice what I preach and have a look and just see when it's going to be that small. So my quarter peal of 120 changes in brief is: call each bell unaffected, start with the fifth, then the fourth, then the third, then the second, and then repeat. Then call yourself unaffected, followed by an in, out, and make it. And then you need to put in the final 60 changes. So all that I've said so far is all in my course, and it's probably a little bit slower and in more detail on the course. So have a look through and just work through each section and do a little bit at a time, and don't leave it all to the last minute. Now, I also said I was going to tell you how I practice. I've had Able and Mobile for quite a few years, probably fairly soon after they both came out. And if I'm going to ring anything, and I'll just take a drink. If I'm going to ring anything, I do practice and practice and practice on mobile. Well, first of all, I practice on mobile so that I get my method right. I'm very lucky in that I've got MRDC, so I can then go along and practice there. I do find that if I make a mistake on a simulator while practicing, it does tend to be where I make a mistake in the tower. And I can remember early last year, I was ringing in a quarter peal of Spliced, and I kept messing up the singles. And the conductor said to me afterwards, I knew when you were going to go wrong by your face. And I thought, I knew when I was going to go wrong because I practiced it, and that's where I always go wrong. So it is quite, I'd say that's the downside of it. I do use Able and Mobile to practice. I load the quarter peals into Able. I load my touches into Able. And I don't just use the random bob and single setting, which is on there. And if anybody wants any help on how to do that, I'm really happy to talk them through it. I think through working at MRDC, I've got to grips with Able. I can. I also use it to practice sections of ringing. So if there's a particular bit that repeatedly goes wrong, then you can select that piece by just highlighting on the method, and you can just keep ringing that bit until it sinks in. And if you come to a sticky bit, you can press the W key, stop, and then press the W key and you can resume. And I think there's lots of little tricks on Able like that are just so useful. The help section is really good as well. I have actually been sad enough to read through the whole help section. So I've seen bits and pieces on there that I still haven't managed to get to grips with. But putting in your touch prior to ringing the quarter peal is so useful. And don't forget to take off the stop at rounds. You can put in there how many times you want rounds to come to do before the simulator will stop. So any questions you've got on Able, do please ask or email me. And I think that I've come to the end of my plain Bob bit, Roger. So do you want to do your Grandsire? And I'm sure you'll be better with the sharing the PowerPoint bits, because I hate doing that.
Okay. Just before I do the Grandsire bit, is there anybody got any particular questions, or shall I move on? If you want to ask a question, you can unmute yourself.
I had a question, if it's okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's quite basic. The in, out, and make a bob bit, I didn't really understand what that meant. Does that mean you call? Is that when you call?
So it's where you run in it. Yes, actually, I didn't explain it at all, did I? Really? So so one of the positions is when you're 4 blows behind. So as you're making those long fourths at the back, so you call the bob at the beginning of there. The other places is as you run in. So you were going to do a 3/4 down dodge, and you then run into the down to lead. So that's one position. Running out is where you would have made seconds over the treble. and you miss out your dodge and you go out to the back. And the final position is doing 3-4 up, and you make the bob and go back down to lead again. And then you do 4 blows behind next time.
That's cool. So it's where you are when you call it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Or the other way of doing it is to, as I said, look and see pick a bell that is doing the 4 blows behind and watch when that one's coming up to the back. But I think that's probably a little bit trickier to start with. It's probably easier to do your positions first.
I think Nikki's at an advantage because she's been ringing quite a long time.
Yeah.
Hasn't been
Yes, I do forget that.
And the other thing you don't know is that Nikki is also a musician by background, so she can hear things which normal people might not be able to hear. So,
yeah. I also think one of my big failings in teaching people is that I always assume if I know it, everybody else knows it. And I'm all, like that question, well, why don't you know that? I know it.
And the other thing is, in terms of bob doubles, I mean, I'll explain in Grandsire in a minute, but in bob doubles, if you're going to do 3-4 down, you need to think where you call the bob. So you actually call the bob at the backstroke when you're in 4th place, just before you do the dodge. So you go down into 3rds, and then you don't dodge back. You carry on in, take the treble off lead. And in plain bob, all the calls are at backstroke, aren't they? So
yeah,
you're going to make 4. So if you're dodging 3-4 up, you pass the treble 2-3. So when you're in 3rd place, before you do your 3-4 up dodge, the backstroke, you call the bob, you do your first blow in 4ths, but then you don't dodge back into 3rds at backstroke, you stay in 4ths and then go back in. So you have to learn where you call the bob, because each of those 3 different positions, it is a different place in the work. Yep.
The more we talk about it, the more complicated we can make it sound.
Grants easier, right?
Yeah, and I really think that's where the practicing. Has everybody got able or mobile or something similar? So I really do think that just looking on there and over a cup of tea and having a look and seeing where those calls are made and just calling it. On able, you can leave the bobs on there so that it calls them, or you can actually turn them off. But it still says on the screen Bob, and it is really, really useful just to sit there with able going Bob and just getting used to where those calls come. And then it seems 10 times easier when you're in the tower as well.
Okay, should I? If
nobody got another question.
No, we
yes,
have.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
2 very, very simple questions.
Oh, I like simple questions. I might not know the answer.
I've heard various people, as you did earlier, say, oh, it's bob plane, bob plane, bob plane.
Yeah.
Now, to understand it, you ring 1 lead and call a bob at the end of that lead.
Yeah.
And then the next lead end is plane.
Yes, so you don't say anything.
Keep your mouth shut.
Keep your mouth shut. And that's harder than you think as well, because you're thinking, well, did I say anything last time or not? You have to really concentrate.
And the other little question is exactly what is an extent?
Okay, so it's 120 changes.
Oh, okay.
All the time we've got so many words that mean the same, haven't we? It's like a different language. It's English, but not as we know it.
Thank you.
An extent is 120 changes. Have we got any more questions? Oh, yes.
I just wanted to apologise for being a bit late. I had this in my diary at 10:30. Sorry.
I didn't notice.
I did. Right. Let's put up the Grandsire bit, because I cover some of the things from a different perspective. So the share.
Roger, I'll have to listen because I've forgotten how to call Grandsire because I haven't practiced it.
No, don't be so modest.
It's true.
From the beginning. Right. First steps in calling Grandsire doubles. What I'm going to do, one of the things in terms of conducting any method, there's a lot about patterns. There are all sorts of patterns there if you know what you're looking for. So as this talk goes on, you'll start to see me tell you more and more about the patterns that there are in Grandsire doubles, but the same things apply in a different way to other methods, and they're all ways that can help you in terms of conducting. So the traditional approach is to get somebody to call 120 or an extent, which is all the possible changes of a doubles method, straight off. And I think it would help to look at really just calling a basic touch of 60 changes first, and that hopefully, as you'll see as we carry on, will help to show you some of the patterns that are there that might not have been obvious to you. So those of you that ring Grandsire, you're probably familiar with the term observation bell, where a bell makes thirds and then it dodges 4/5 up, double dodges 4/5 up at a bob or a single, and then it just repeats that. Sorry, it doesn't repeat that. Obviously the position in Grandsire is different. Plain bob has only got one hump bell in the plain course. Grandsire has two, so the line of symmetry is in a different place, as is where you call the bob. So you call the bob when the treble is in thirds place, going down to lead. And you remember I talked about having to learn the calling positions for bob doubles for in, out and make it. In Grandsire, it's, if you ring the observation bell, it's much simpler because you call the bob as you're passing the treble at hand stroke. Okay, so the treble rings over you on the previous backstroke, you ring over it on the next hand stroke. So that's nice and easy. If the treble isn't there, if you're calling the basic touch, you don't need to call anything. So that already is a clue as to what to do. So you repeat that again. So next time you pass the treble going up 2, 3, you call another bob, and then you finally call a third bob, and it comes round after 60 changes. Okay, so the first tip is it's easier because you don't have to learn all the different calling positions. Just stick to calling the observation bell. The next thing I'd just like to talk about is the duties of a conductor, and I put these in order of priority because in ringing you're multitasking. So the first thing you've got to do is you've got to ring your bell, and you've also got to keep right in the method. If you get lost, then everybody's lost. And you've got to put the call in the correct places. Hopefully I've explained why that's easier. I think unless you're calling the observation bell in bob doubles, it's certainly straightforward in Grandsire. And something Nikki's already mentioned is it's up to the conductor to say go and start again. Sorry, stop and start again if the striking is poor. I mean, there's so much emphasis these days on ringing methods, but bell ringing is a very public performance. There's an audience outside that's listening to it, and actually there's other ringers in the band that are also listening to it. So there's no point saying go until the ringing's settled down. And again, if several ringers are lost, or even if 1 or 2 ringers are lost and you can't put them right, there's no harm in just stop, ring rounds or stand and then start again. You know, don't grind on and on and on trying to find your way through a piece of ringing when 1 or more people are hopefully lost. Another thing is the conductor is to check that the ringing is right, and that's probably more important in a quarter peal or a peal. It's not really necessary if you're ringing a practice night touch, because you can just keep calling your 120 and sooner or later it will come round, certainly within the next 4 minutes, probably earlier. And the last thing in order of priority is the ability to put other members of the band right. And I would say if you're calling your first quarter peal, 5 and 6 are just not important at all. As Nikki said, there's lots of people out there who are experienced ringers. And if you ask them and they say, well, I've got the tower and I've got some of the ringers, will you ring and help me keep an eye on things? They'd only be too willing. And I've known them in the pub when I was young, which is a few years ago now, that even buy me a pint afterwards and say, well done. So, and even quite experienced and quite famous ringers will do that. You know, even Alan Regan I've known to come and ring in very basic quarter peals and peals of plain bob, and he's rung, is it 6,000 odd peals? So there we go. So just moving on to our basic touch. I talked about patterns which are there. So the first call, which in our standard touch, which is a bob, but it could be a single, you double dodge with the fifth, sorry, the second, if you're the observation bell, and the third. The next call, you double dodge with the fourth. And the last call, you double dodge with the fifth. So you're ringing the third. So immediately you know that you're 2, 4, and 5, you know where you meet them somewhere in the touch. But it's even better than that, because if you look at the screen, you'll see that I've just shown where the 2 is. Before you double dodge with the 2, that bell is in the hunt. And it's actually the bell that you make thirds over at the plain lead, the lead before. So you're the third, you immediately know in that first block where the 2 is, because you make thirds over it and then you double dodge with it at the next call. The same thing then with the fourth. The fourth is in the hunt and you make thirds over it, and then you double dodge with it at the next call, and then obviously it's the fifth's turn. So that's also, I think, helpful in terms of patterns. And not only that, but the lead before that, where you're double dodging with the 2, the 4 makes extra thirds at the bob, so it goes into the hunt. Then you make thirds over it, and then you double dodge with it at the next call. Okay, so you're ringing the third, you know where the 2 is, you know where the fourth is. There's only other one bell apart from the treble and tenor you need to worry about. So that just happens to be the bell that's making normal thirds, which at this position is the fifth. So by a process of deduction, and it takes a lot of practice to see these things, you can keep an eye on most of the bells quite a bit of the time. So the same thing applies at the next call, and a similar thing applies at the third call. Okay. And the thing is, in terms of that third call, if I just go back, sorry, gone back too far. No, I haven't. Pressed the wrong button. So that third call, you'll see that the second goes into the hunt because it's going to come round at the next lead, and the fourth makes thirds because you're going to double dodge with it. Sorry, you're going to do a single dodge. Sorry, the fourth is going to dodge with the 5 at the end. And you can see that you've got basically, when you're double dodging in 4/5, you first of all ring over the second, which goes into the hunt. Then you make the second dodge over the fourth, which is making normal thirds. At a single, instead of that, the fourth makes seconds and the second makes long fourths. So all the single does, it swaps over 2 and 4 if you call the 2 in that position. You can substitute bob for single at any of the 3 calling positions. So that immediately gives you 3 different 120s that you can call. And so that hopefully shows you yet more patterns that you can work on. But as I said, if you're calling your first quarter peal, or even your 5th or 6th, you don't need to worry about that too much because there'll always be another member of the band that can help you. But there's also various clues there, because if you're calling bob bob single, bob plain, single plain, if you forget where to call the next single, you know, for example, if you called the first one with the 5th, if you find yourself dodging with the 2 or 4th, it's got to be a bob, not a single. So you only need to call the single when you're going to dodge with the 5th. Or if you call the single when you're double dodging with the 4th, you know that the next 2 calls are with the 5th and 2nd, and you only need to call the next single when you're double dodging with the 4th. So can you see how patterns help you see what's going on, and also give you clues as to, if you get lost, when to A, make the calls, and also B, which call to make. Okay, and I'm nearly at the end. I would say that certainly calling your first court appeal and probably your second, third and fourth, it's very important to keep it simple. Don't try and call 6 or 7 or 10 different 120s. Just call 3. They all look the same in the ringing world or bellboard. And that's plenty of enough calls to get your teeth into. To ring a court appeal, you need 10 times 120. And as I've said before, you can substitute a pair of singles for any of the bobs at the 3 different positions. And what I tend to do is call each 120 twice. So I watch what's happening in the first one, and then I can have a better idea if anybody goes wrong in the second one. I find that if there's 320s, it's probably trickier to remember whether I've called 2 or 320s. So I just tend to call each one twice, and then any 2 of them twice more. And then you finish with the standard 60. I think most people would do that. Some people prefer to start with the 60, but there's a reason for this, and which I'll explain in a moment. And if you obviously got some experienced ringers who are helping you, have a plan, tell them what you're planning to call beforehand, and that also helps them and helps you as well. And another thing, I think Nikki touched on this, why not jointly conduct? My son and one of the other young ringers from Alresford, we got them to jointly conduct a quarter. This one was Bob doubles, and one called the odd extents, one called the even extents. I've run court appeals where three or even 4 ringers have all taken it in turns to call 120s. And if you've got an inexperienced band, you know, that gives them more useful practice without putting them under pressure to call it. And it's actually quite good fun because they all help each other out. And then you as an experienced ringer can just be there to coach them along. And finally, what happens if you miss a call? Obviously, I've told my experienced ringer what my plan is, but I miss out that bob. What do I do apart from panic? Well, in Grandsire, and this also applies in plain bob, if you just call your 60 changes, so I've missed out the bob, and I put a plain lead in. So if I call bob, plain, bob, I've run what's called a round block of 60 changes, which is nested inside. So I just then carry on and call the court appeal. Sorry, not the court appeal. Then carry on and call the 120, but it now becomes a true 180. So, I mean, there's no rules for court appeals, but if you're in appeal, that's legitimate. You can nest 120s in each inside of each other. But that means then you don't need to panic. You just carry on. The only thing you need to worry about is that obviously you were ringing the 3rd observation, and everything I've said about the 3rd applies to the 5th, except it happens a lead later. So it will be plain bob, single, sorry, plain bob, plain single, wouldn't it? But with the 5th, if you're ringing the 3rd, you're then going to be affected in a different way. So that all that happens is that with the 3rd, you would go into the hunt at 1 call, come out of the hunt at the next call, if it's a bob, and then you'd make normal 3rds. It's a slightly different sequence if it's singles, but here we're talking about 3 bobs in a row. So call yourself into the hunt, out of the hunt 2 leads later, and then 2 leads after that, you're down to you do 4, 5 up, and then you make normal 3rds. Okay, but that's probably coming on to the sort of next talk, which is about more advanced conducting and calling. The aim of this talk was just to talk about really calling your first few touches and working up to calling a court appeal, which is not actually as scary as it, hopefully I've shown it's not as scary as it first might seem. As Nikki said, and this will be quite useful in the recovery after the pandemic, obviously there's various simulator tools that you can use. This is actually a picture of the Mancroft Ringing Discovery Centre. They moved the 12 bell ringing chamber up a floor. I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago now, Nikki. And
yeah.
Yep.
It would be, yes, was it 2017?
And in the old ringing chamber, you've got a set of 8 dumbbells, and each one's got a simulator. And Nikki, I'm sure if I ask her in a minute, I'll tell you about the courses and the sessions that they run there. But that's what you can do. But obviously, we've talked about using Able at home. Obviously, you don't need to have a 12 bell tower and put in a whole load of dumbbells. There are other towers that could equally, and I think, for example, Romsey, you've got a much simpler installation, but it can be just as useful. I'm sure Martin would talk about that if we ask him. So do practice at home, and if you've got a simulator, you can actually practice in the tower. Nikki's mentioned the online course. So ART's been quite busy over the last 9 months, producing a lot of online material, which it's recently been collaborating with the Central Council on. And there's now an online learning portal, and there are currently 7 different online courses, and there's a whole load more stuff that's in preparation. So that's things such as basic steeple keeping, how to splice a rope. There's an online course on calling bob doubles and several other things such as minor methods and so on. And the idea of these online courses is that there are video clips, there are presentations and speaker notes, and there's also some quizzes and some other interactive stuff that you can download. So although Nikki's only talked for about 20 minutes today, you can have a couple of hours of fun learning about calling bob doubles if you do the online course or one of the other subjects that's there. The Central Council has also put together quite a lot of YouTube clips. I looked at it yesterday and it's a bit out of date because there seems to be an explosion at the moment of different guilds and associations doing webinars, and quite a few of those, if you hunt round and do a Google search, particularly St Martin's Guild, Truro, and also the Lewisham District of the Kent, they've done quite a lot of these. And certainly the Lewisham District, Kent, there's also a session on a webinar on calling bob doubles, as is there's one that's done by the St Martin's Guild on doubles methods as well, which is quite worth watching. And the Association of Ringing Teachers also got a YouTube channel with loads more clips on things like how to use Able, how to use virtual belfry, etc. So there's a lot of stuff. So finally, thanks for coming, and it's over to you if you'd like to ask some more questions. So do unmute yourself if you want to.
I'd just like to say, I think it's easier than it sounds as well, because the more you talk about it, the more daunting it seems to get as well. But really, just getting out there and having a go, I'd really suggest, and have a go on Ringing Room as well. If you're in Ringing Room practices, that's such a safe way to practice at the moment. And there's lots on the Take Hold Lounge. I'm sure that there are practices for, from basic ringing upwards. So go along on the Take Hold Lounge and have a look and just ask to have a go.
Yeah, so we've got a guild Ringing Room practice next Saturday morning. So I'm going to send around a questionnaire on Monday or Tuesday. But if you'd like to have a go at calling the touch of plain bob or Grandsire, we'll put you in a room to do that. And the Take Hold Lounge is a Facebook group, and if you look on the events page, there are quite a few ringing room practices that are held all over the place at the moment, and it tells you what ones are coming up. So people like Chris Cordova's basic one, no, it's probably too basic, isn't it? But certainly there will be opportunities to call things on some of those events that are held. I mean, there's several every day now that are taking place.
I think you could ring all day on there, couldn't you, if you wanted to?
I think Nikki and I know somebody who might.
I think we do. You said about the MRDC, the Mancroft Ringing Discovery Centre. So the type of courses that we've done very basic bell handling. We do simulator practice each week where you can just go along and practice on your own. Bell handling classes, junior practices. We've run courses on ringing plain bob doubles, courses on ringing Stedman. And one that we did, I'm just having a look to see what audience I've got. We did one that was very popular was Ladies That Call Bobs, which we had a whole day where we just turned up, and it was a band of people that we could ring surprise, but we probably couldn't call anything. And so we just set about calling different things and helping each other out and sharing ideas. Went for a very nice lunch at a local restaurant, and then came back and had another go in the afternoon after we'd had our glasses of wine. And it was just a very relaxed atmosphere. And I think from that's really what got me going was our Ladies That Call Bobs, just making it a nice, friendly environment where it was safe to have a go. And of course, on a simulator, the outside world can't hear. So if it didn't quite work out, it didn't matter quite as much as practicing in the tower. But really, if somebody has an idea on a course, we'll give it a go. And it's just, we can ring there at any time, unless there's something going on in the church which would affect ringing. But most of the time we have run through weddings and funerals. It's really only when the organ starts playing that we can't ring, because we can't hear ourselves.
Because you're right in the town centre, and I think you do some during the working week. During the day, people can just pop in and have a session, can't they?
Yes, we just have open sessions on Mondays and Fridays, and if you want to book a session during the week, then you can do. So if you're up on holiday when we're all back ringing again, contact us and I can let you know what's happening, or we can arrange something. So.
And you also do things during the school half term and holidays, don't you?
We do, yes, that's very good. I'd forgotten about our juniors. So during school holidays, we tend to have a couple of sessions for junior ringers. You just advertise it. They can be people that can't ring. So we tend to have about 3 or 4 art teachers there who can help just introduce people to ringing. And then the junior team also looking after themselves, mainly by calling their own touches and calling their own call changes. And takes a lot of people to be there to supervise it, but they're good fun, and we have a lot of people turning up to them, and they do come from quite a long way as well. I know you're a very long way from us, but Essex is quite accessible by train, so Suffolk and Essex come across, people from Cambridgeshire come across. They're good sessions.
And sort of 18 months ago we had a learner's day, didn't we, on a weekend, on a Saturday, wasn't it?
We did, yes. We had a whole day where we used the Norwich Towers and Mancroft, and at lunchtime, actually that's something that we did which was quite different. We then had Mancroft bells available during the lunch hour, and they're not really for the faint-hearted. They're a heavy 12, quite difficult to ring, but we had some rounds on the 12 for lunchtime. And from that, we then went on, and I started using Great Yarmouth, which it's about 25 miles away from Norwich, but there's a very easy to ring 12 and that are available at Yarmouth. And so I then set up some 12 bell practices, but it was for learners. So it was ringing rounds and ringing kaleidoscope exercises on 12. And it seems a real shame now. It's 12 months since we did that. We had over 50 people in Yarmouth Tower, and they were inexperienced ringers, and we still managed to ring 12. And we could do things. We didn't try. I would have liked to have tried switcheroo, but it would have been a bit extreme. But we did things like big change, little change, and Mexican wave, and no call changes. Mainly it was ringing rounds, but it was just the experience of ringing on 12. And that all came about from the day that we had with all the different, we just had different workshops on the day when MRDC was open, all the Norwich Towers. So one of them was speaking while ringing. We had bell handling sessions. I can't really remember what the other ones were now, Roger. Can you remember?
They went on simulators.
Ringing on simulators, funnily enough. I went to that one in the afternoon. It's very interesting. So I don't know who ran that.
Yeah,
But
so
there were lots of different workshops,
on the
weren't
good
there?
thing, there was about 50 inexperienced ringers, but we also had about equivalent number of very competent ringers, some quite well-known ringing names who came along and helped. And I remember at lunchtime, the posh band rang the 12 and they rang something and all the learners clapped, didn't they? So I thought that was quite amazing. And anyway, so have we got any questions on Grandsire and Plain Bob? We've done a bit. No.
Roger, if people wanted to practice what we've been doing this morning, I'm quite happy to set up something on my Zoom account and use Mayfly's Tower. If they contacted you, and you can tell me if they just want to come along and do calls, some simple touches of bob doubles or Grandsire, then I'm really happy to do that. And everybody can have a go and in private, and we can all make fools of ourselves
And help each other.
Exactly, but I'm really happy to do that. So if anybody does, could you let Roger know, and then he can see each other ringing quite frequently.
I circulate on Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
It's another opportunity, isn't it? And then
yeah,
hopefully in the summer or the autumn or next winter, you can set up a ladies who call Bob's group for the W.
I really recommend those. It was really nice. I think it's for lunch though.
If there's anyone there, I know Isla knows, but if there's any, and Jenny, but if any of you ladies are in the Ladies Guild, there is a regular Friday lunchtime open ringing practice on in ringing rooms, where we have, yesterday we had 14 of us actually, and we can have breakout rooms, but we can do from really straightforward stuff, whatever you'd like to do. If you want to do surprise methods or anything reasonably complicated, you can do, or we can do Bob minor, plain Bob doubles, whatever you like. But in the ringing room, the Ladies Guild Facebook page, you'll find it, and on the ringing room take hold lounge, it's announced with the link. So please just, if you'd like to come along. I'm afraid even if you blokes wore frocks, you couldn't do. I couldn't join, but sorry about that. And any of the ladies there, you're more than welcome to come along and join us. And if you're not a member of the Ladies Guild and are interested, come along anyway and find out about it. So, done my advert, Roger. Thank you.
Okay. Any more? So if not, I'll stop recording, and then thank you very much for attending. Okay.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you. That was really interesting. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if you have got any questions, then do contact me. But have a look at the course, because you can do that. What tends to happen when you do a presentation is you try and fit so much into it, whereas really I'm advocating little steps, and that's what the course does. You can just look at one section of it, do that part, go along to your practice that sounds like you can have arranged locally, and then move on to the next section. Don't try and do it all in one go. Do little steps and it will work.
Is this course available online, or do you have to?
Yes, it's online.
It's online. It's online.
What you'll need to do is
Just on the ART site.
Yes.
Yes.
I need to go back to the link which I had. If you go to just a moment, let me call it up on my screen.
It's from the homepage on the ART page, and it's something like the learning portal. It's called.
Yeah, if you look for online learning, which is one word,
Yeah.
.bellringing.org, that should.
Well, that's part of ART, right?
Yeah.
Yes, you will need a separate username and password the first time you log on to the learning portal for technical reasons, but it's all there. And at the moment, there are 7 different courses that come up. But then the idea is that there's a team of people developing more courses. There's several of the Birmingham ringers who are doing it, are developing other material. Because I think that what will happen after the pandemic is that a lot of the courses that guilds and associations used to run face to face, certainly for 6 or 9 months at least, it's going to be what they call blended learning. There's going to be a mixture of doing it in towers, but you can do the theory online, and instead of having whole day training sessions where you spend an hour or 2 in theory, you can actually do all the theory online. So I think that's the way it's going anyway.
It'd be a great improvement on the old format of having to book out a tower and somewhere to put people and spending the morning doing the theory and then going up the tower in the afternoon, and just the logistics of organising all that. It's much easier just to do theory online, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those that can access it, because not
So we
everyone's
could do
computer savvy, but
because on a traditional training day, you might have an hour and a half in the morning, an hour and a half in the afternoon, and the rest of the time is spent travelling around, isn't it? Whereas we could do a guild webinar one Saturday, and then people can go and spend an hour and a half, 2 hours the following Saturday at a tower which is just around the corner, which then you could do.
The other thing I think, well, hopefully you'll find I'm probably a lot more coherent on the course than I am just suddenly delivering a presentation, which is really quite hard to do. So the course, you know, if I had made a mistake or started gabbling on, that was all taken out. So, and I will send the outtakes, they are hilarious. But the course, Beth Johnson put it together for me, and it's polished. It's come across very polished and a lot better than I would have imagined it would be. If you know, from what you've seen of me today, and then compare the course, I think you'll see where I'm coming from with it.
Very modest. Okay. Okay. So I'll close the session now, and we'll see you again soon. Okay.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much,
Thank you.
Nikki.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Roger.
Nice to meet everyone.